we have 6 cruise terminals. All of them have been renovated or built within since 2014. So everything is essentially new. The Cruise Terminal 3, which was purpose-built for Carnival Cruise Line, was completed in June. It has not yet had a customer there, except for a lay berth on one of the cruise ships. It was laying idle for a bit, but the terminal is about 180,000 square feet. It was the biggest project we ever did in the port. Spectacular facility, and Steve will get you some pictures of it for the article, because it's really incredible, and we can't wait to open the doors and welcome our first guests through the facility. Other terminals that we have, even the ones that were built back in the 90s, have all been completely refreshed and rebuilt just in the last 3 or 4 years. So we're in a very, very good position for the cruising public. Other things in the port, let's see, we've got a couple of projects. North Cargo Berth 8, which we are still completing now, was started last year. It's the last undeveloped parcel of land in the port. That is going to be a general use facility. We right now are moving some space components through there. It's set up where we can move any type of cargo through there. We put a pier extension in. It's under construction right now. That pier extension will allow a starboard side ro-ro ramp to land, and we can handle vehicles quite effectively as well. The other big project we have is North Cargo Berth 3. It's one of our oldest berths in the port. We were successful in winning a federal grant award for that earlier this year. Maybe it's last year now. It's losing time with COVID time. But anyway, it's a new berth that we're going to completely rebuild it to new standards. What's happened over the years since Port Canaveral was made, we're a man-made port, and at the time the dimensions of the port were scaled to the size of ships at the time. And when you bring in the biggest cruise ships in the world, such as the Harmony of the Seas, and you put it alongside a dock, now all of a sudden the beam of the ship extends into the navigable channel, and you can't move the same ships that you were moving before. So one of the elaborate aspects of the North Cargo Berth 3 is we have to move the berth line into the land side right now, just to allow proper width in the navigable channel for a vessel to be alongside without protruding into the channel. So it's an exciting project. Now that's a project we had hoped to have be breaking ground on it now, or between now and the end of the year, but COVID is kind of put a damper on that, and many of our projects, if not most of our projects for long-term capital construction, have been put on postponement until we see some resurrection of our regular core business from the COVID down cycle.
So, Captain, as you rightfully pointed out, ports in and of themselves are huge economic engines for the regions that they serve. I'm quite certain that the picture that you saw at the end of 2019 is quite different than the picture you saw today. And if you'd like to discuss the impact of COVID and its impact on the region, you can do
Absolutely. I'm happy to. People look at a port and they see what we do, and they don't tend to understand the extended family that we have in the business world that keeps a port operating. I'll start with something very basic: labor. All of our cruise lines, most of them anyway, are ILA labor. The ILA is totally dependent on crews at Port Canaveral. So every one of those porters that are working the ships, loading the stores, doing all of that hard work, none of them have had any work at Port Canaveral since the shutdown of cruise. So that's just the basics. Same with the boarding people, the operations folks for the cruise lines, and you think about how many people it takes to board a ship. I can tell you that when we build a parking spot for cruise operations, we have to put in between 300 and 400 extra parking spaces for cruise line employees, and those are the folks that come in every time a ship comes in. They come into the port, and they are the ones that embark the people on board and assist with debark with the people coming off. And those folks have basically either been laid off or furloughed. They're not port people, but those are the people that depend on our operations every day. So it's really painful for them. You think about, we've got one partner in the port, one of our tenants who's a logistics supplier for the cruise lines. That's their core business. Well, the cruise lines all shut down, their business is down to zero. We have another operation on one of our terminals. We've got what's called Crew Express, and it's a facility that assists the many thousands of crew members that come through our port every year. Be it an ability to get out and make a phone call, or to receive an Amazon package that might be mailed there. They provide a great support service for all of the cruise ships coming in through Port Canaveral, and those folks have no business now. So I mean, there's some very, very tough times on people that are totally dedicated to the business. We as a port authority, we have the luxury, and I hate to say it's a luxury, but all of our capital projects are largely funded either through state and federal grants or through our own operations. And what we fund is a great portion. Let's say a huge project such as a road or berth. Most of what we're funding in these projects is through our own operations. So on that basis, we have to be very careful about how we spend our money. And as a result, when the COVID stop sale order was imposed, the no sale order was imposed, we were in a position to say, okay, if this is going to be down for a while, we need to look at what can we do to cut back on spending, save what reserves we have. We may need them for an extended period, and that's exactly what we did. So we started pulling projects off the table, and we'd already had funds allocated for many projects, and we were able to put them aside and say, this is going to get us through this crisis. Unlike the airlines, the seaports in the United States have received, the airports and the airlines, the seaports have received no federal aid, no state aid. Everybody's been on their own. If you're a diversified port with many different cargo mixes, then you may have been more or less impacted by the slowdown in shipment of goods. But those that are very heavily cruise dependent, when the federal government imposes a no sale order and shuts down an entire industry, it's painful. So we were fortunate in that we operate as a standalone entity. We don't have a backstop such as a county or a state government. We're an independent financial district in the state of Florida. So we always have to look out for ourselves. And going into this, we were in a pretty good position. I can't say the same for all of our partners out there. When you cruise out of Port Canaveral and you're going to Universal or Disney or any of the Orlando attractions, then you come down to Port Canaveral and you're leaving the next morning. Generally, you spend the night in a hotel, and the hotel will run a shuttle service perhaps to the ship the next morning and hold your car for parking if you want a lower rate, or you might drive into the terminal. But everybody wants to be there early, and the hotels and restaurants in our area really survive off a lot of that cruise business. Right now, their occupancy rates are in the teens and 20s. It's terrible, and these hotels are really suffering. All of the ground transportation folks are suffering. They're not moving buses, they're not moving shuttles. The Uber drivers, Lyft drivers. You just think about the impact and the outreach, and it's really extensive. And then there's people who are going on a cruise that would also roll in other aspects like the Orlando component or a beach stay or a drive down the coast. That none of that tourism is happening in Florida right now. And this is really crippling the state from a budget perspective, because so much of Florida's economy is dependent on tax revenue from hotel taxes, sales taxes, et cetera. So it's been tough. It's been tough. And I guess my point is there are people in tougher positions than Port Canaveral itself. It's been a very, very difficult year for Central Florida.
Obviously, COVID-19, as we've been discussing, has impacted everything. Can you give me a concise overview of how it has impacted the construction projects that you have in
Absolutely.
the pipeline?
Absolutely. When you're a port authority, of course, is a public entity, and we all issue debt in forms of municipal bonds, or we might secure debt through banks in a municipal bond format. So when you do that, generally it's funds are drawn against a particular construction project. And when we receive that money, it's put into what's known as a restricted fund for that particular project. So When we went into the pandemic, we had two major projects that were already drawn down on our financing, and one was a Cruise Terminal 8 and 10 renovation project, and the other was the new Cruise Terminal 3 project. Cruise Terminal 3 is the one that I just mentioned we were building for Carnival, and it was supposed to be delivered in May. We ended up with a little bit of slowdown with the COVID, and we finished it in June. But we kept going with those projects because, as I said, they're called restricted funds, which means you can't use them for anything else. It can only be used for that project. So we had the funding to complete Cruise Terminal 3. Cruise Terminal 8 and 10, it was very fortuitous, but we received the funding on the project exactly 1 week prior to the no sale order being issued by CDC. So we had the funds, and the good news about that is we were having to juggle ship schedules throughout the summer, because in order to do the extensive renovations in that terminal, we were going to have to take it offline. The good news is we haven't had to take it offline because there's been no cruise activity, and we've been able to move forward with that project, and it's progressing quite well. And we should have that pretty much ready for use toward the end of the year, which is great. So from that perspective, we've been able to keep those major projects online. Other projects like the Cargo Berth 3 project that I mentioned, yes, we're going to continue to do that, but we're going to delay that until a more appropriate time. As I mentioned earlier, most of our investments in Port Canaveral are funded through cash from operations. So if we don't have any operations, our cash flow is not really there to dedicate to projects. It will be. The cruise industry is going to come back. It's a very, very vibrant industry. I think it may come back stronger than before. I think in some ways, and it's been a healthy experience in that some of the older ships are being phased out. They were on a path not unlike the container lines, and this is just my humble opinion, but the container lines back in the late 2000s, everybody was in the race for the bigger, better ship, and how big can they get? And when the 14,000s came out, we thought they were big, and then all of a sudden there's 18s, and gee, maybe somebody's going to build a 20, and now we got 22s. And you think, in 2008 and 9, I was with Hapag-Lloyd at the time, and all of a sudden when the world went into the Great Recession, all of that extra capacity was just killing the markets. I think in some ways the cruise lines were heading in that direction with some of the new ships, bigger ships coming out. So this is in some ways, and like I said, my personal opinion has been an ability for them to reset on some of the older tonnage and look to the future. So I think when everything does get back up and running again, I think it's going to be a better passenger experience when they do cruise, because the ships are going to be newer. They're going to be more innovative. They're all working on COVID protocols that aren't going to go away. Once they implement them, they will stay in place. And I would gamble that a cruise ship will probably be one of the safest places you can go if you have any paranoia about COVID in the future. So I'm really excited that when it comes back, it's going to come back in a better way. What positive thing that's come out of COVID, and we've executed in many ways in the port. The first thing that I said, okay, now we're shut down, and when we come back, how are we going to do it? We need to be contactless. So we started saying, okay, what do we have to do to be a contactless port? If we have a large recreational component where people will buy a pass, and everything was driven on a dollar-based world where somebody's handing cash around or a credit card, and said, no, let's figure out how to get this thing automated, fully automated. The cruise lines are doing the same thing. And when everything's back up and running, it's going to be amazing what they can do as far as contact tracing on a ship, who you've been in touch with, all on a wristband. So it's going to be a different world. It's forced us to do things that we thought were good ideas that now we're actually doing them and implementing them.